So I want to introduce Matt Osterman, who is I don't want to call him a local filmmaker. He's a filmmaker who lives here. He's made several feature films. He lives here, and also we know who these people are, James and Roger Deakins. He's going to lead the conversation, and then we will show Fargo. So please listen up, enjoy, and have a good night.
So we can hear.
Check. Do I get a certificate if I don't screw this up?
Yeah.
Low bar. First of all, thank you for everyone being here. Thank you to MSPIFF, Craig, Susan, the sponsors, all you film fans, filmmakers. None of this is possible without you. Thank you to Steve Spears and CineMechanics for making all of this happen. Thank you to Team Deakins. It's incredible that you're here. I know we had an event last night with a film industry crowd, and it just felt like spirits were buoyed that you were here, and it was a great pleasure to be there as well. I know that when I got the call to do this, I'm like, absolutely 100%, how much do I owe you? And they said, nope, it's free, don't worry about it. I'm like, I don't believe you, but I brought my checkbook just in case you want to meet me after the show. With that, let's get started. For those in the audience that don't know your story, you're now famous collaborators on numerous fronts, but you first started as colleagues on a film set. Can you kind of tell us the story of how you met and how things evolved? I mean, keep it PG.
No, we can't.
I was a script supervisor and Roger was the DP, and we did work together for the film. So our first relationship was a working relationship, which actually has done us well later on because we're very quick to switch over to work if we have to.
Yeah.
But I would assume having that professional relationship, I mean, made things, a lot easier later because you already had that working relationship, which you've carried on to this day. So maybe it's easier to code switch between the two.
Definitely way too easy. Actually, I think we're incredibly boring as a couple.
That's probably a good thing, right? If it was all
well,
fireworks
it is for
all the
work,
time. Right, right.
Not so much if you invite us to a dinner party, but.
Speaking of dinner parties, a film set can often be like that, Roger.
Really?
I mean, you have the loud, boisterous one.
It's
You
like
have
here,
the quiet
I'm
one in
gonna
the
move.
corner. Yep. The one person, doing illicit things. Could you tell me a little bit about running a set? I know you have a pretty core group of collaborators, sometimes on the directing side, like the Coen brothers, but crew members that you work with all the time. And I would imagine you've developed an unspoken language with them that makes your job a lot easier. Can you tell us maybe some of the advantages of that?
Well, yeah. I mean, I tend to work with the same people over a long period of time. I mean, the dolly grip I worked with up until the last couple of films when he retired, I met on Barton Fink, so that's a few years ago.
And also, it's great to see you working with him because you'll be on the dolly operating, and Bruce is pushing, and Roger does something with his fingers, and Bruce knows that means go faster, go slower. I don't know what it means, but you have this great way of signaling.
An unspoken kind of language, yeah. I mean, no, it's great. You get to, and first assistant I met, actually, Fargo was the first film he was focus puller on. I met him on Shawshank. He was the second assistant. And we made him up to first assistant for the last couple of weeks because the first left because he had another job. And then I say, I'm Andy Harris. Fargo was the first one he was my focus puller on, and we worked together ever since.
Yeah, that's incredible. Like you said, you also famously operate the camera on almost everything, right? Pretty much everything.
Definitely.
Yeah,
everything.
Yeah.
Everything but a film I got fired off, but I won't talk about that.
And you've also had the good fortune to work with some incredible casts and actors over the years. So therefore it means that you are literally the first person in the world to witness some of these performances. Do you feel yourself ever getting, kind of distracted or pulled out of your job because you're witnessing something great? Or are you fully in? Or do you find having that performance is almost like having a good dance partner and you feel yourself working with them on a different level?
That's what pulls you in. It does me anyway. I mean, the fact, I think I was saying this last night actually, that, when it was film, emulsion, before there was any video assist, let alone playback and record, the operator was the first person who was seeing the shot the way the audience was going to see it. You'd have dailies, obviously, at the end of the day, but the next day, but you were there watching it for the first time. And it was hard not to get a thrill when it was like, well, for me, it was Richard Burton and John Hurt on 1984, so you can't kind of get better than that, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Kind of put your jaw back up a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, that's incredible. And you started shooting documentaries early on?
Well, I didn't really. I mean, I started shooting all kinds of things at the National Film School.
Uh-huh.
And then when I left the National Film School, I did shoot a bit of drama. And I shot rock videos, pop promos, as we called them back then. But mainly documentaries for about 6-7 years, I suppose, yeah.
Sure. So in a documentary sense, you're trying, if you know the term verite, you're trying to capture, truth in front of you. And I know how modern films can be so planned out to a T. Do you ever find yourself trying to set up the environment where you can capture those happy verite moments, those magic moments?
Well, I think you've got to, it doesn't matter how structured a film is or how much preparation you do, like even on Fargo, you do a lot of preparation, you storyboard, the whole film is storyboarded, but then you still leave yourself open for those little moments, those happy accidents on set. So you're not really, it's structured. But in a way, I think having that prep and that structure behind you leaves you more open to sort of play when you're actually, on the set, because you know all the elements you need. So that leaves you free to kind of construct on top of that, I think.
Well, and you kind of have to also, because you go through prep and you go through the script over and over and over again, and you think you know it absolutely. Then you get on set and you're actually in the physical location, and you have the actors come on and they actually say it in a different way, and it makes you see it in a different way. So you need, in a way, a movie has a life of its own. In prep, you're starting with a script, but then you kind of bring it to a different place and you make changes and you think, this is this movie. Then you shoot it and the actors are there and suddenly you realize that character is actually a little different than you thought. And so you should change with it and let the movie be what the movie is. Then the movie goes into editing and you've got an editor who wasn't on the set, who doesn't care that crane shot took you 8 hours to get, so should be in the movie. Nope, it doesn't work for the story. And the story becomes what the story should be. So to me, that's what the magic of movies is. So if you do get very structured and you storyboard and say you only can do what's on the storyboard, I think you're missing a lot.
Except...
Okay, you're gonna...
Except the first time I worked with Joel and Ethan on Barton Fink, there were 6 shots. We shot 6 shots that aren't in the final film.
Yeah, but sometimes...
And everything else...
But sometimes some of those shots weren't on the board, and you made them different on the day.
Things change, but I mean the sort of structure.
So you're getting to the editing part.
The basic structure and everything and the flow of it was actually there on the page almost. Yeah.
Well, it tends to be easier when you work with a lot of geniuses too, right? Where they kind of know what they're doing.
It helps my job for sure when I'm working with them.
Speaking of helping your job, James, it's understood how closely you two work together, but are there any examples of where you contributed a good idea, but Roger gets all the credit?
Oh, all the time. All the time.
Can we have an
Yeah.
example?
No, I have to go home with him tonight, so I better not.
No, but the thing is about it. The thing is about it. It's like a collaboration. So I could say things. I could mention things that James brought to a couple of films, ideas. I mean, more than just shot, actually concepts in films that are obviously down to the director as you see the film, but they're not. They're James's ideas. I can also say some ideas that Bruce Hammy, my dolly grip, came up with on a set, but the director gets the credit. But that's what it is. You know, the director is obviously the person that says, oh, I'll take that idea. But, you know, everybody else, I think when it works best, everybody else is contributing something. You know, you put ideas forward all the time, and most of them are dismissed because they're probably rubbish. But at least, you know, you're allowed to do that. And sometimes, yeah. So in the end, it's all the director's ideas, but, you know, it comes from a lot more than one person.
Yeah, that's a sign of a functioning, healthy set, right? And it doesn't mean the movie's going to be better, but at least everyone feels empowered and heard. And
yeah, so I mean, I don't like to sort of analyze something. You say, well, that was my idea, and that was a costume designer's idea, and that was, you know what I mean? It's like, no, it's everybody together, and that's what you have. And yeah, it's the director's film.
in your personal life, are you often talking films, or if you're working together on a project, or do you try to check out and leave that at the door?
We occasionally try, but we don't do very well. We'll say, okay, this weekend, let's just do a normal weekend like everybody else does. And then we'll just start saying, okay, yeah, right. But you know that shot, don't you think it should have been a little bit over left?
That is why we're together, and we do what we do, and we kind of, yeah, we don't argue very much.
I mean, it's a 1 + 1 = 40 with you two. I mean, clearly you've shown that over the years. So yeah, you figured it out somehow. I need to take some lessons. When the Coen brothers first approached you about Fargo and said they wanted to shoot in Minnesota, be honest, what went through your mind?
Oh, no, nothing about that, actually. No, I mean, they approached me and they said, because it was after Hudsucker, and Hudsucker had been a big film, one of the most, at the time, obviously, it was their most expensive film, and it failed. So they were going back to do what they told me. They were going back to do a small film in Minnesota, and it was very low budget. And, well, would I be interested? Probably you won't be interested, but we wanted to give you the opportunity in case. So what went through my head is, of course, I'd be interested. I didn't. It was nothing to do with Minnesota and the fact it was cold.
Well, and famously, it was supposed to be a snowy winter, but when you got here,
snow.
It really wasn't. What kind of challenges?
Night shooting.
Yeah.
Awful.
I mean, they had to create a lot of the snow, right? And you had to change some shots around and locations.
Yeah, they had a ice machine creating snow. So like there's a parking lot, a couple of parking lots. There's one at the airport and there's one outside of Tower Block, and they both had to be snowed in. And there was a lot of, and when we were doing the car chase, the killing scene, that we kept moving the location. We get to the location we'd use one day, and we got there the next day and the snow had gone, so we had to drive further north to find somewhere else and just go and find a field, which luckily there's plenty of them.
Well, for everybody in the audience, we know this winter we had no snow either. So yeah, it does happen every now and then. And because you've been here a few times, any special Minnesota memories? Any red meat for the crowd? Anything that stands out?
I don't know, it's all in the films, I mean, yeah.
So again, I'm gonna have to read this. James, you double majored in Latin and Greek, worked in a film lab, became an in-demand script supervisor, and now are an expert on the technical side of digital workflows. I'm sorry if I'm showing my biases, but you either have an incredible attention to detail or a ridiculously high tolerance for pain. Can you explain?
Yes to both, because if you're a script supervisor, you've got to be fairly masochistic, I think. But what was the question?
I mean, you have a technical brain, you're analytical, you're able to pay attention to the details. Has that been with you since day one, or is that something you've learned to lean into?
I guess it's been with me, I guess, and then being in a film lab was supposedly going to be a very short job, and then ended up into a much bigger job. So I learned the technicality of film, and then being a script, I learned the technicality of putting a film together, and then.
Weren't you one of the first script supervisors to like use a computer and everything and do programs? Yeah.
I do like technology, I have to admit.
Well, you helped build the website,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
You guys know
did
the
build
famous website. Yeah.
And
So you've always been a technical, creative person, interested, probably.
yeah, and then when I stopped scripting so we could be together more, because oftentimes we'd be on different shoots, I would work in the background in film. But then when digital came in and we started shooting digital, it wasn't scary to me because it was like a computer, but a lot of the productions hadn't done digital before and were afraid of it, so they wanted a person that was comfortable with it and knew how to translate it into dailies and, workflow and things like that. So I kind of just crept in there.
And Roger, your father was a builder, right? Did you, at some point in your life, think you were going to work in the trades, or do you find now that that craftsman mentality has kind of, influenced your work?
Well, it has. I mean, I kind of loved it, but I knew it wasn't for me, I mean, he was a builder. I mean, he had a little company with like 4 or 5, specialist craftsmen, and, they're great, but it wasn't for me. I mean, my dad thought I was going to take on the little business he had, but it wasn't my world. So, but, but I still see similarities, because I think anybody, I don't know. I was getting into this last night about the word art, I mean, I think anybody that loves what they do and puts themselves into it, whether it's the plasterer or the bricklayer or it's the cameraman or whoever, I mean, then somehow it's art. It's their art, for the one that a better word.
Some people build houses, other people build stories and worlds.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
So I mean, I loved it working with these guys, when I was a kid, but I didn't get the same satisfaction I saw them get out of it,
Yeah. Is there anything that the two of you did to manifest such an amazing career, or is it just a series of good decisions stacked on top of each other?
A lot of it's saying no. I mean, I'm serious and I'm being flippant, but I'm being serious as well, because a lot of it is like not accepting the first thing that comes along. And I've never been somebody that's doing it just because it's a paycheck. I mean, I really haven't. And, I think you need to stick out for what you kind of believe in and what sort of somehow means something to you,
That's great advice. James, anything to add?
No, I would just agree with them.
Yeah.
Life's too short to do something you're not really feeling you're getting something back from.
Yeah, amen. Let's talk about the incredible Team Deakins podcast and the Byways book. I know the podcast launched kind of right around the start of COVID, but it must have been in the works prior to then.
Well, we thought about it beforehand because we were doing a lot of PR for 1917. So we would do these Q&As and then afterwards talk to people and be asked the same questions. So I said to Roger, I said, well, what if we did a podcast and answered these questions so we could say, here are all those questions? And Roger went, well, what's a podcast? And I didn't know a lot about podcasts, but it was interesting to me because I've always been a very visual person, and I had to learn audio, which was tough. So we started it right before lockdown, and then lockdown came, which was great. We had a lot of time. So did everybody else. They wanted to get on Zoom and do this with us. So, it developed in its own way, and we suddenly realized that it was more we very strongly believe in that making a film is a collaborative process. We absolutely. So it was fascinating to us to talk to people in different categories, and also important to represent the different categories. But maybe you talk to two different prop people, and they're doing the same job, but they come into it in a different way. And yet they have the same passion about it that we have about what we do. So that was really interesting to us. And yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's an incredible podcast. Everybody should go subscribe, like. Are there any episodes that stand out that anybody should start with, maybe?
Well, I think it's really interesting because they're all very different. So it depends what you're going for. We talked to an Argentinian director, Juan Jose Campanella, on a Thursday because he had directed one of our favorite films, A Secret in Their Eyes. And he was amazing and enthusiastic and really talking about directing, and it was so interesting to talk to him. And then the very next day, we talked to Garrett Brown, who invented the Steadicam, knows everything about the Steadicam. And that was fascinating, but very technical. So there were two very different experiences. So some people prefer the technical. Some people say, I love the one with the woman from the lab. And then someone else will say, that was the one episode I didn't like so much. So,
I would imagine you feed off the energy too, talking to all these people that are passionate all the time, right? So it's kind of a win-win-win for everybody.
Yeah, well, and we see all their movies, some good, some bad. We'll go and try and see their first movie and then see what they...
It's a nice excuse to go back and revisit films also that you really love. Like we talked to Wim Wenders the other day, and so we went back and looked at Wings of Desire and Wings of Hope and Goalkeeper's Fear of the Penalty Kick, which I hadn't seen for like 30 years or something probably. So it's great to revisit things and then talk to somebody that's been like an icon, for so long.
Yeah. And tell us about the book. That was more of a COVID project, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. I mean, it was something that we had thought about because I think Roger just liked the idea of having them all in one place. But we never had the time to really follow through, and we did have the time during lockdown, so we did it.
Yeah, beautiful. One more question, then I think we'll open it up for a few more questions. Does anybody have the time? How much time do we have? 20 minutes? Perfect. Okay. We're going with a heavy philosophical question here.
Uh-oh.
Right, that's it then.
Yeah. What's your favorite color? No. Where do you see the future of cinema going? Because right now we're kind of in these weird crossroads, right? Where everybody's a little bit scared of the technology. Viewing habits are changing. They're going to be, you used the word last night, Luddite, people that stick their head in the sand and don't evolve or don't use the tools. Can you give us a little bit of your insights on where you think we may be headed? Granted that nobody really knows.
I don't know. I mean, I've been the first to embrace technology. I mean, like, digital camera and the DI on Oh Brother, or, different things through my career, really. I think new technology, you can embrace and use it in different ways, like 1917, the way we move the camera and stuff. But I'm not sure where it's going to go with AI. I don't think anybody does. But I think I'm hopeful about it. I'm hopeful it's going to open more opportunities for people. I mean, they did say when digital cameras came along, it would democratize filmmaking. I mean, it has maybe a little bit, but it's not really been quite what I think a lot of us imagined. But maybe AI will help that as well, so that films aren't films, I mean, they're not so much now made by elitists in Hollywood. I mean, there is that side of the industry, but it's falling away, and I think that's a good thing. But I'm not sure what it's really going to be replaced by. I think at the moment the jury's out, isn't it?
Well, I think also at the moment, because of the strikes and everything, that what's coming up now seems to be bigger movies or sequels. So we're just sort of waiting to see if there'll be more story-based independent type of films. For the podcast, we got contacted by Cord. Is his last name Jefferson? I'm not sure, but who did American Fiction.
Yep.
And they sent us a link to the movie. We saw the movie and we really liked it as an example of a small movie that was about something, which was great. And when he got the Oscar for the screenplay, I thought he said it so well because he's so articulate that he hopes that there'll be more middle budget movies, but is that going to be true? I don't know.
Yeah, we're all waiting, I think. Yeah, cool. Well, with that, I think we can open it up to some questions. I think, do we have mics on hand, or are we just going to speak loudly? Okay, lovely. All right, anybody, we got to, of course, way back first, but you can pick. Go ahead.
Should I stand? I'm gonna keep sitting because thank you guys for being here. This is so great. I'm really curious, especially for two people who have been in the industry for so long, making great work. Like, I'm curious about something recently that you've seen that's given you energy, inspiration, has made you feel excited about something, about doing something new or doing something. But just about making the work, I guess.
Well, James just mentioned American Fiction for one, but I mean,
Perfect Days.
Perfect Days would be another.
Because that was such a small movie, 17 days, and yet it's such a lovely movie. That was really exciting to see.
I think that's a really positive thing. There are some small movies. There's some being shown here. There was a film that shown yesterday, I think Limbo, that we saw that made in Australia. I think those smaller independent films give us hope. You know, they're kind of personal. They have an identity that, you know, they stand out from other work, and that's the thing that I want to see. Is I want to see a film with a personality, with somebody's a director, you know, view, not just some rote kind of production, you know.
One here, one way in back.
Yeah, okay.
I see you in back. Don't worry, we'll get to you.
This might be more technical, but I heard on your podcast you speak to light quality in one of them, and it's fantastic. Practical lighting versus source lighting, having different bulbs. I think that's such a unique thing if you have that control. I want to speak to this movie specifically because shooting in Minnesota, which I've done for many years, snow is the biggest bounce in the world. So was there a particular lighting situation in Fargo where control was hard? I guess the question would be, what was the biggest challenging scene or moment in this movie we're about to watch in a lighting perspective?
Well, I mean, you know, most of it is done. There's very few traditional film lights used in it. I mean, it's a lot of like little bulbs and, you know, little gag lights, what we call gags. You know, no, it's like, you know, if you have a hanging light bulb, you put a gag behind it, which might be like a little 150 quartz bulb that you hide behind a 60 watt or 100 watt ordinary household bulb. And that is all different now with LEDs, but that was what it was in Fargo times. So the only time I was actually using traditional film lights was one small set we had, which was the bathroom, and out on the night shoot with the car stuff, where I was trying to dummy the headlights. I put a couple of lamps on the front bumpers of the cars so it would light the road. I mean, that was reading the script, that was the most challenging thing, the night shoots, not the snowscapes or anything, other than the fact that we wanted a certain light. We didn't want bright sunlight, so that was a challenge, but you can't do anything about that. But the night shoots, it was like, okay, well, what do we want to see at night? And just making the decision that we don't want to see very much was really important, so that actually the only thing you see is what the headlights show you or what the red tail light shows you when, you know, Stramar's standing there with a gun. He's kind of lit by the red light as he's killing actually it's the storyboard artist who's running away from the car. J. Todd, it was a cheap production. But so, it was that kind of lighting. I mean, another film I do, like Blade Runner, it was like totally different. There'd be a huge amount of traditional lights, but Fargo was very much documentary-ish in a way, and just using gags and using existing practical sources and, choosing the right one for the set.
Did that allow you to be faster then too, not having to worry about big setups?
Well, it's not, one's not faster than the other. It's all about prep and thinking what you're going to do. And it's looking at, you go into one of those restaurants, there's a scene in a restaurant there in a Radisson, and you go in and with a set dresser and say, well, actually, I need to put something behind the bar that will give me the light over here or whatever. So it's all about prep and just thinking it through.
Hey there. I trying to think how to say things, but one other question that I had for you was: is there any movie in particular where you feel like you might have shot in digital instead of 35 millimeter if those cameras were available all the time? Like, if there was like a movie in like the 80s or 90s where you might have used digital cameras if you had the option.
All of them. I would have slept easier at night because I wouldn't have been lying awake thinking, did I get my exposure right, or is the director going to like the look of that? Don't have to worry about that now.
Great. Well, thank you.
Back here. Okay. Hi, I just wanted to know, James and Roger, what was the first film that you worked together on? Maybe not collaborating like you do now, but how did you meet?
We met on a film called Thunderheart in South Dakota.
And then what was the first film you collaborated on as you do now?
Well, we've been doing it for a long time.
Yeah, it was a gradual thing because, James would come on a film and she would be working in the background, but you couldn't say she had it wasn't like a crew position or something. She would be there. So it was just a gradual, wasn't it? A gradual change, really.
Because I used to set up to make sure that we were seeing the dailies like on a Lock Pro or something, and then be watching the dailies. But then, depending on the movie, sometimes there'd be more questions about, do we have it, do we not? And then I got more involved because I would go to the lab and see things and stuff like that. And it just sort of became more and more gradual. And also because, quite frankly, I got tired of working in the background. I mean, if I was going to do the work, they might as well know who was doing it.
Hi, I'm wondering what advice you might have for young people in the film industry.
Advice?
Yeah.
No, if you've got a passion for it, just get on with it and do it. I'm serious, there's no, especially now, there's no excuse because it's not exactly very expensive to take your iPhone and go out and make a movie.
Yeah, but I think I think another thing is just to kind of stick with it and to know that there are ups and downs, and a film set can be the best place in the world to be on, or it can be absolutely the worst. But you know what? If it's the worst, you get through it, and the next one's going to be at least better than the last one. So I think it's just to stick with it and know that when you have a bad experience, it's not the end.
But I also think to have belief in yourself. I was being flippant in a way, but in a way I wasn't. No, because you got to do it yourself. It's not how I've done it, or how James has done it, or how Joel Cohen's done it. It's how you want to do it. Find yourself, and do it yourself. There's no substitute to that. You can be inspired by any kind of work. outside of yourself, but you can, the work you do has to come from within you, doesn't it?
Roger, I wanted to, because you mentioned National Film School, I wanted to take you all the way back to that, and you mentioned early Wim Wenders. So what did you see at that time, either growing up or film school? Great school. I think people like Lindsay Anderson probably taught there. But something you saw that you said, I want to make these images. This is what I want to do.
I don't know that I've ever had that moment until I was actually starting shooting on a set. I don't think it was ever really clear in my mind where I was going. It was just like I was, I was just trying to find myself, and I was just shooting for. I made my own films at film school, and I shot. Then I started shooting for other students, and then when I left, I just got the jobs I got. It wasn't until I was on 1984 that I realized I'd sort of found somewhere I wanted to be, frankly.
Thank you. Excellent.
I'm coming.
Do you have a favorite scene in Fargo that you enjoyed shooting the most?
Favorite scene? I have a favorite moment because we were out on the road on the insert car, and it was brutally cold. And I remember Mitch Lillian, my key grip, who I worked with for I don't know how many years now, and James is no longer than I have. He came up. We were all freezing to death because on the insert car moving at a speed in the cold, and he said, I'm okay. And he had this great big thermal suit on, and his hands were out like this, and he looked like the Dunlop man. And I said, but you can't work, you can't move. And he was like, wasn't he? He was like trapped in this thermal suit, and he was really warm and loving it, but he couldn't do his job. Sorry, I did this sort of things you remember.
We've sort of brushed on it a little bit, but question for you both. You've had such long careers. How do you keep the love and the passion of filmmaking alive over a long career?
That's a good question. I think that you have to be careful about burnout. If you doing a film and then another one comes up and I'll just go ahead and do that next one, and then I'll do the next one. I've made some very bad life decisions before I met you by doing film after film after film. So I think be careful of burnout, because that can make you feel not very passionate.
Yeah, but you get inspired by a script, and that's the thing. We're kind of waiting for something to come in the door, and sort of you go, oh yeah, that's it. I really want to work on that. I've been very lucky all my career. I've I was saying earlier, I have turned down things because I thought, well, I don't see myself going to work every day for that, and then, there's one particular big film I turned down, and my agent was really angry with me. And then, and the next day I got offered a film that was probably one of the best experiences of my life. So you know what I mean? It's like you guys got to kind of hang with it and believe in yourself, I guess.
How are we doing on time, by the way?
Yeah.
Okay, 2 more questions maybe?
Sound good? Okay.
Hi, I'm curious about the kind of comedic tone that generally comes with some of the Coen brothers' work, including this film, and how much of a conversation that is with them, either in prep or when you're kind of working on the shots, and how you think about it visually in your choices, if it's at all, or whether it's more on the performances and what they're doing.
I think what's really interesting about the way they approach their films is they don't approach them as comedies. So there's no sort of question about, like usually a comedy you like kind of flat because you want to see the comedians perform. You know, there's no discussion. I don't remember a single discussion about how funny or how not funny a scene is with them. You just approach it just directly as
But
you would any other film, comedy or not.
they also quite naturally have a very black sense of humor, and their sense of the absurd is well developed. So I think they naturally, I mean, you just talk to them and,
Well,
and
I think,
they're
yeah, I mean,
funny.
the comedy comes from it being kind of just played for real. And I think that's the thing. I think, you know, like this film or I mean, The Man Who Wasn't There is probably the most graphic one that I've worked with him on. Most unlikely comedy. And it's just played for what it is. And the humor comes out of the fact that it's, yeah, creating a, how can I explain it? A kind of real world. You know, you're not trying to play the comedy up in any way.
Last one. Oh, no.
Last one.
Okay.
Make it good.
All right, well.
No pressure.
Alrighty. Thank you for coming. I had a quick question about this line of work that you did when you were consulting for animated features in the mid 2000s. I think WALL-E and How to Train Your Dragon were some of them. And we talked about technology earlier. I'm just wondering if you've kind of taken some insight from that work and brought it into live action, as there's been a confluence of a convergence of live action and digital and special effects in recent years, if you've been able to draw from that experience in the past.
Yeah, no, I don't think directly, but I think that was interesting. We found interesting that we thought we were brought into working on animated films because the director, particularly on WALL-E,
Andrew.
Andrew Stanton, wanted a live action feel to, you know, which they weren't doing at Pixar and so that rolled over to Rango and then the How to Train Your Dragon series, and they all wanted their films to feel more live action. So it felt like then, live action was influencing animation, but really it seems like the emphasis now has been on animation and techniques and computer techniques coming into what was live action. So I think it's really interesting the way the two disciplines are kind of melding together.
We had a really fascinating meeting with the technicians who created the software for the lighting programs, because their lighting programs, when we started in it, were fairly counterintuitive, and they no bounce light. Light didn't react the way that you would expect if you were in the real world. So we had this great meeting in a room with all these screens, because their technicians were all around the world, with Roger explaining what happens when a light comes in through a window, and you know, the concept of bounce, and they're genuine questions because they had never looked at light before and looked at what happens when light hits a red leather thing or whatever. And so they changed their software and made it so you didn't have to do 5 steps to do what one lamp would do in a movie.
But the funny thing was, okay, this is going to be a bit, at the end it was funny because on the last How to Train Your Dragon, they went out into the lighting guys went out into a forest, right, and used a kind of 360 virtual, you know, they scanned the light coming into the forest. Basically, they took that light and then took it back and put it on the animation that they'd done, and it looked like shit. But they were so happy they'd taken the real world and put it on their, and I thought, this is exactly what's going wrong. Because just because you can do it and just because that's the real world doesn't mean it works for your movie. And so I think that it's related to me to AI, and that just because you can do it doesn't make it right. And the other thing I'll say about animation that was really interesting, talking to all the guys there. And I mean, there's like hundreds of people work on like How to Train Your Dragon. There's like 500 people, and they're like all over the world doing this. And some days, as James says, you're in there, and there's New Delhi and Toronto, and they're all over the world you're talking to, trying to get this one little scene done. But it's basically the same as live action. It's still using a frame and how you move the camera and what you show and what you don't show, and how you build suspense with the movement, or the lighting. What do you like and what do you not like? So it's the same language, and I think that was something that I think it struck me, but it struck them as well. I think that they didn't realize that's the common thing between animation and whatever you do in AI and whatever you do in live action. It's the same storytelling language, isn't it? I think.
Well, I'm sure we could go on for another hour or two.
I could, yeah. I was on a roll.
I think there's a movie. I think there's a movie they're planning to play here. But let's put our hands together for Team Deakins.